Okay, great. All right. What makes a good sports? Let me try again. What makes a good sports photo? What do you all think makes a good sports photo? Emotion. Okay.
Capturing the person in the actual picture.
Capturing the person in the actual picture. Okay. Brad?
Action shot.
Action shot. Okay. Okay. Y'all have seen sports photos. Come on.
Like a full picture where there's stuff going on in like the background as well as like something happening like that's okay.
Okay, so maybe context. Contextualizes where we are, where this story's happening. Now let someone else have a go. What else do you think? What do you think makes a bad sports photo? Sometimes that's easy. I'm gonna try to get another voice in. Tyler?
Maybe when it's like too much glare, so it's like I'm really sure the features and looking at the powder with glare in the background, but the main focus was not blurry, like maybe the entire image.
Yeah. All the technical things we talked about, right? Having the right thing in focus so that we can know what's happening, right? Having the right shutter speed so that you can actually see the action that's happening, so that you're freezing that action. Yep. All right. All of those things are a huge part of sports photography. I would argue that the most important thing is timing. So that is going to be timing of the moment, which is capturing an important moment and actually being able to capture the action, kind of what Rod was saying. So we want to have the person in the frame, but we also want to have what's happening in the frame, right? And if that is a storytelling moment, that's even better, right? So let's imagine football. We have a person who's running down the field. Is it a better photo if they have the ball or if they don't have the ball? Right? So like trying to find the person who's doing the important thing on the field, right? If we're photographing baseball, maybe there's someone kind of like waiting in the outfield, but the action's not happening. While that is a sports photo, that's not like the best sports photo. The best sports photo is where there would be something happening, right? Somebody's trying to steal second base and you have that person kind of waiting to see what's going to happen in that action. So timing of the moment, but also timeliness. A huge part of sports reporting is getting out the information of who won the game really quickly, right? If you care about a sports team, you're gonna be refreshing your phone to see what the score is or listening to the radio to see what is going on as the game unfolds. It won't be as relevant if you hold that information and publish it 2 weeks later, right? Maybe they will have played another game. Maybe they will have played another game. Maybe the score of the first half totally changes during the second half, right? So getting your reporting out quickly is a really large part of reporting sports, the timeliness of it. So it's kind of like breaking news in that way. I would argue, yeah, just like breaking news, getting it out as fast as possible. Where some of the other stuff like these portrait assignments, those are more what's considered evergreen, where you could really publish them kind of at any moment. They're always relevant. All right. So with the timeliness of it, reporting it quickly, but also doing your reporting before going to the game of knowing if something big could potentially happen at that game, right? So maybe this is the final game in the championship and they're going to win it all, right? Or lose it all at that game, right? Maybe this is a player's last game because they're a senior that's going to be graduating and this is the last time they'll be able to debate or play on the field, right? Maybe this is a player's first game after a really bad injury and a season worth of rehabilitation, right? Even if you don't care about sports, sports has such amazing stories. There's incredible stories in the sports world. And doing a little bit of legwork to look into that will help your reporting be more interesting. It'll help your reporting be a lot more interesting. So we don't really care about a week old score. You should know the stakes going into the game. Is there a specific player you should watch? Like, is there maybe a specific player that's getting scouted, or a specific player who has this story, who is a senior, who's retiring, or maybe who just came off the bench, who was like redshirted and now they're playing, right? Is there someone who like got injured and we have a new player filling that role? All of those help you figure out who to photograph, right? Who there's probably going to be a story about. Whether, even though the game is unpredictable, you are probably going to be able to know some of these other stories going into a game to be able to prepare for it. All of that helps with the reporting and kind of news angles. Oftentimes when you photograph college or professional sports, and oftentimes even high school sports, when you show up to the game, you'll usually check in and somebody will give you like a packet of statistics, of kind of like statistics on the players, so that you can know, their heights or their batting averages or whatever relevant statistic for that game. And that can also help inform your reporting. So keep that. And we'll talk more also about rosters and how helpful rosters are going to be. But that packet of information, and you can also just like, if you're going to cover a Mercer event, look the team up online. You can find up a lot of that information online. And the second, or like the third item of this timing is, so you can't predict what's going to happen in a game, right? But certain sports, you can decide where you're going to be to photograph the action that unfolds there, right? So if we're talking baseball, where are some points on a field that you think you might photograph in baseball? Tyler?
Okay, I don't know a lot about baseball, but I know like a little spot where the guy who's squatting.
Catcher, yes.
Yeah,
and the bat, and they're,
yes.
you're probably gonna wanna take a picture of the person hitting the ball, right? Yes. Macy? Okay, home base. Mandy?
Kind of between like not always online, like between the person batting and then like first base, you can kind of get a shot of the field.
Yeah,
Going on, especially
the bases, right? Things are probably gonna be happening around the bases, right? If you were to be photographing football, what locations do you think really matter in football? Michael?
Non-scrimmage, football.
Yes, exactly. No?
End zones.
End zones, yes, exactly. Like, what happens in the end zone? The game is determined, right? There's always areas like that in a game or whatever sport that you can predict where action is going to happen, right? So you can stand in a space that can help you prepare for those moments. All right, this is a photograph of Barry Bonds connecting his 756th home run, breaking Hank Aaron's record, which had stood unmatched for 33 years. The photographer took a risk in pursuing the historic hit by shooting from the right field outside of the ballpark through a chain link fence. The proximity of his long telephoto lens to the fence blurred it so completely that the fence is not visible. So you can barely see it, right? So you can barely see it in the final picture. The picture of the record-breaking hit summarizes the news event. So going into this game, it was pretty predictable that this record was going to be broken, right? There was an opportunity for this record to be broken. So a lot of people were there preparing to capture that moment, right? And so this photographer, I bet they weren't running late and accidentally there, right? I bet they went the day early. I bet they brought their gear and they tried it out. They figured where they needed to stand. In that idea of shooting, I talk a lot about bringing something close to your camera to have something in the foreground. So they are basically shooting right up next to the net, which is why it blurs and you can see through it. And the reason they chose this is because if they had stood in a different location, you wouldn't have all of those fans in the background. If you had stood in a different location, you would have had the catcher, right? Kind of that picture that that you assume that you see when someone hits a baseball. But this standing in such a different location allowed for that storytelling photo where all of a sudden now we can see all those people reacting in the background, right? We see their faces and we see them taking pictures. We still see the catcher, but it kind of paints that picture of where to be. All right. Does anybody know this moment? All right, Larry, what was happening?
So you have Kawhi. I think this is like game 7. Like so this was a game that gets to the actual like championship, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so pretty much the clock was like running down, and Kawhi takes like this fading 3, and I think it was probably like if the ball bounced around like 4 times, and it finally like fell in, and they won the game. The Raptors.
So this is the game-winning shot that determined if they were going to be able to go to the NBA Finals, right? All right, what do you feel for those of you who don't like sports, Faith, what do you feel from the people up there in the back? What's the, emotion? We got some stress. We've got anticipation. All right, Ariana, what do you think?
I was just saying, it's really anxiety,
Yeah,
but it's waiting.
look at the tension in their bodies, right? Like that's so much tension in that body, like waiting, right? This like arched, like what is happening, right? There's so much storytelling in this. Look at this person's face, right? There's so much there. This is this unbelievable, the timing of the shot, right? This is like if this was happened a moment earlier or 1 minute earlier, this photo was taken from the exact same place, right? You would not have this moment. I'm gonna show you. How do I go to, hey everybody, I always feel, share screen. I'm just gonna share my whole screen. All right, this is the moment. All right, everybody watch. It's an amazing moment in sports history.
You gotta be aware of the inbounder here if you're still.
It's off the Leonard, defended by Simmons. Is this the tackle?
So everybody is like,
Here if you're still.
oh, this is that photograph, right? That's that one moment that really.
Simmons, is this the tackle?
All right. Sometimes I think it's fun to try to find the moments. All right. So sometimes scooting back and photographing from a different place can give us more of a storytelling image than just that picture of the action, right? We could have just had that photograph of the action, but this is a different shot that captures that story. If you were to run one photograph with this in a newspaper or online, this would probably be the photograph you choose, right? Of that specific moment that happened. All right. So the timing, you want to be capturing moments as they happen. And as I said, sports are really predictable and they're really repetitive, right? So even if you don't know a sport and you don't know how to prepare for a sport and you don't know like where you should stand, you might be limited in where you can stand naturally because they might limit where the press can be. But also, it's going to happen over and over again over the course of an hour or however long the game plays out. So you can move around and try different locations, right? That's the point of this assignment. So you want to try to capture action and ideally storytelling action, but even just action, right? That's what really makes a sports photo. And in the ideal sports photo, or one of the kinds of sports photos, you'll be able to summarize that game in a picture, right? So it'll be a picture of the action that really changed the game, right? Or it'll be a picture of maybe the first pitch of a pitcher who came back in after being injured for a whole season, right? Like there might be one storytelling picture that you could predict, right? The picture of Barry Bonds hitting a home run. They probably photographed all of his hits before then, and then eventually got the one that was the home run, right? Because as he goes up to the plate, you don't know if it's going to be the home run or not, right? All right, what to think about? Thinking about game highlights. So later, if you were to miss this game and then you were to watch a recap of it, what are the moments that are going to be included in that recap, right? Those are really storytelling moments. Is there a turning point or a comeback? Was there a moment where one team was losing and then all of a sudden they got ahead and they started winning, right? That is a really seminal point in the game. The winning goal that won everything, right? Like that moment that got them into the NBA finals. Oftentimes the start of a game, there's a lot of ceremony at the beginning of a game, starting the game off. Yep.
So with injuries, could you run into like some ethical issues? I feel like snapping like a certain picture of maybe not potentially gruesome injury could be like a little bit of an ethical issue.
I don't think so. I think I'm sure there's a way to do it in a way that's invasive, but you probably won't be close enough to do that. And oftentimes when someone gets injured, people like flood onto the field or court to protect them. And if it is an injury that is like a really necessary one, like we lose a player because of that injury, I think that's worth reporting on. Yep.
By playing a sport, especially in like football or baseball or whatever, you're playing it in front of a large people. And so in a lot of ways, I think that kind of means it's fair game, as long as, like if someone died during the game, that would be a different story, but that's not necessarily what happened. So because it's so public, I think that kind of is a really important factor that says you can't probably run something like that.
And the questions, I guess, of ethics, a lot of it's a way that you approach it. It's not, I will say as a photographer, when I'm working, I tend to take the picture and then later decide whether or not I'm going to publish it, right? It's better, I think, often to have that picture and then later have that conversation with an editor of maybe this doesn't feel like a thing we should publish or run. It feels invasive or it doesn't feel necessary to the story, right? It's harder if you miss that moment and it was a crucial moment that you did need. And then also to Daniel's point, if someone had like a really bad head injury and they were bleeding, you're not gonna like run onto the field and get really close to them and get that photograph, right? That gruesome photograph. What will probably happen is that the game will stop. They will be laying down on the field. Other medics will run in, sports trainers will run in, and you can get a wider photo of everybody waiting and people around them. That doesn't really tell you specifically what's going on, but it lets us know that that person's injured. And I think that photograph is just as important in telling. And I would feel more comfortable running that photograph than one that was maybe exploiting the injury or capturing a gruesome detail that we didn't need, but we could have read in the captions. Yeah. And then injuries. So if someone, who's the key to that team, right? Like if your quarterback gets injured, that's newsworthy. That changes everybody. That changes everybody's fantasy football leagues, So we have to know about it. All right. How do you capture these great moments? You don't stop after the action happens. You do what's called shooting through the action to follow the reaction, right? Okay. If somebody makes a goal, what usually happens afterwards? Yeah. And then, and what other reactions might be on that field at the time? Yeah, the other team is frustrated that they didn't get that, they didn't block them, right? Or that they didn't stop that goal, right? So we have one team that's celebrating, we have one team that's devastated. We probably have a really angry coach, right? Like there's a lot of football coaches that are known for really showing their emotions, right? We have fans that are celebrating, we have fans that are devastated. There's lots of emotion that's happening. And so that picture of the image that changed the scoreboard, that's not the whole story, right? all of those other aspects of it, all those other reactions can really be storytelling. So make sure that when you're photographing, you photograph the things that are happening, but then make it part of your practice to like take that picture and then kind of spin around to see if you can capture fans reacting, right? That's kind of why I think sports is so fun, because you have to really be on your toes and you have to react quickly as well, right? You have to have all your settings set. You have to kind of predict where action may or may not happen and be prepared for it. And then automatically switch around, change things pretty quickly to capture the reaction. So that's kind of, it's a game of your own reflexes, and I think that is really fun. All right. So thinking of storytelling, if you were to run one photo, one photo of the game, what kind of photo might you print? And then keep shooting. Those expressions tell you a lot more oftentimes than the specific action in a moment. It's also important to know who your audience is. So for this assignment, this is just for class and I want you to practice shooting sports. But if you were the staff photographer at the Macon Telegraph and you were photographing one of Macon's high school teams versus a visiting school from South Carolina, how might you approach that game differently? Do you think you're going to run a photo of the South Carolina team celebrating on the cover of your newspaper? Right? You'd probably photograph the reactions of your home team to be able to show the story for our local community of what that game's win or loss meant to us, right? So knowing your audience is really, really important for figuring out like how to cover that game, right? For this class, I want you to look up the other team. I want you to look up, our team to try to figure out where, if you think there's a story going into it, right? Like if there is some kind of story going into it. And it's okay, you don't have to have a home team for this assignment. But if you were interning at a newspaper or if you were photographing for kind of a partial side, right? You would approach that game differently. All right, so here are some storytelling actions that include the reaction after the moment. So it's not the moment of action itself, but it includes the reaction afterwards. All right. The Burley wrestler celebrating his victory with a cartwheel after defeating a 13-year champion. By staying alert even after the match was finished, the photographer Smiley Pool caught victory and defeat in one frame. So not only is this the celebration, but sorry you can see that Zoom thing. I didn't even notice. Sorry, you guys. I can't see that Zoom thing on my screen, so. But you're capturing the action, right? You could have captured the moment that the wrestling match got called and the moment that that person won, right? But this is also part of that story, right? We have one person that's clearly celebrating and one person that's a little frustrated. This is Serena Williams when she becomes the first African-American female to win a women's single in the Grand Slam, right? You feel that emotion afterwards, right? That is a much more storytelling image than her serving in the middle of a match. Marie Bochet of France celebrates with her gold medal in the women's standing slalom on Jongason Alpine Center on day 9 of the Pyeongchang 2018 Paralympic Games. So you can just like feel what that win means to her, how much that means to her, right? If you were to run one story, one image saying she won, right? This is a really storytelling image. Mo Farah of Great Britain celebrates winning gold in the men's 10,000 meter final during day 1 of the 16th IAAF World Athletic Championships in London 2017 at the London Stadium. Just like this joy, right, of celebrating afterwards. Lars, I hope you're typing a bunch of notes about every single picture. This is one of my, if you're in the boot camp class, you've seen this picture. I think this is just an incredible, incredible photograph. Naomi Osaka of Japan poses with the championship trophy after winning the women's singles finals match against Serena Williams of the United States on day 13 of the 2018 US Open. You see kind of that celebration, but it also feels conflicted, right? It's like an interesting moment. And then you feel that defeat. I also think this story is just amazing because Naomi Osaka's dad trained her using the methods that Serena Williams' dad used to train them. So it's really this kind of passing legacy. Just think it's an incredible moment. All right. Yasiel Puig of the Los Angeles Dodgers hits a 3-run home run in World Series Game 4 that opened up the lead to 4-0 as Boston Red Sox pitcher Eduardo Rodriguez slams his glove to the ground in disgust. Yeah.
Is that COVID?
COVID?
COVID.
Oh. Oh, yeah.
Wow.
So you get this moment of like celebrating and tension. This like specific moment tells you so much. Yeah, what do you think's gonna happen a moment later?
Pain.
Yeah.
What, like, is that like, I don't, what is the thing in the front of the picture? What is that hit?
It's just a guardrail on the inside of the ring. Jockey Julian Lapro tries to hold on to his reins after his mount, Sanibel Storm, crashes into the rail while on the lead in the stretch drive of a race at Keeneland Race Course in Lexington, Kentucky. The apprentice jockey was catapulted onto the safety railing and into the infield. Yeah, right? So that storytelling really helps out a lot. This isn't just something that happened. He was winning and then he got catapulted from his horse, right? So we hear that story in the caption, in the reporting of your caption. Rod?
How close was the camera down? Was he like at the right moment, right time? Or?
So I don't know the story of this image. It could have been one of two things. It could have been a photographer that was there. It could have been a mounted camera that was using a remote. I don't know.
Of course, it's very clear what he is doing.
I know, it's about to be very scared. But this is that like perfect timing of the action, right? Boston Red Sox left fielder Andrew Benintendi makes a leaping catch during Game 2 of the World Series against the Los Angeles Dodgers at Fenway Park in Boston. This is in 2012. Defending Olympic weightlifting champion Matthias Steiner of Germany lost his balance while trying to lift about 432 pounds and was hit in the neck by the barbell. He got up on his feet and waved to the crowd, but later withdrew from the competition. Do you hear how telling that second sentence was, right? We had just what happened, but that second sentence of he got up on his feet, waved to the crowd, but later withdrew from the competition, right? Incredibly storytelling. Your captions are where the reporting really happens.
He okay? Like, it's like 400 pounds.
He got up.
That's a lot more than 400 pounds.
I'm not seeing how you get in this situation.
How you get that information?
No, how you got in this situation. Was he like powerless? Was he like? Was that what he said?
He said he lost his balance. Y'all know who this is? JC, what'd you say? Yes, this is Bob Knight from Indiana University. Coaches often feel a lot of the pressure. So look for the coaches, right? They're going to be feeling this game just as hard as their players, right? You might have one that doesn't react at all, but oftentimes they are going to be celebrating or frustrated, or you're going to see tension. They're going to be yelling. a lot of storytelling pictures can happen when you photograph the coaches as well. Rod?
Isn't that the guy that, threw the chair in the,
Wait, what?
He's like famous for like being an intense reaction, having intense reactions. All right, so captions. Again, we're gonna have to answer those who, what, where, when, why in all of your, I want who, what, where, when, why in all your captions, right? For that first sentence. And then the second sentence is gonna tell us why it matters, right? Just more information that makes me more interested in that picture. How do you think you can find out this information? You're not going to be able to like stop the game, run out onto the field and ask them those questions. So what kind of things would help you know this information? Mandy?
Doing research beforehand and like having like an idea of what everyone in the roster looks like.
Yep, doing research beforehand. Idea?
Your own powers of observation, like how they saw the guy get up and leave and then.
Yes, your own powers of observation. Exactly. You're there. You know what's going on. Noah, did you have another?
I was gonna say, for team sports, play your rosters.
Yes, a roster is important. So for those that don't know, like a lot of athletes wear a number, and a roster is what you can find online. So you can find it before you go. You can also probably pick up a roster when you get there. A lot of times they have rosters there, and it'll have everybody's name and it'll have their number, right? So these are some pro tips that I use when I'm out. All right, when I'm photographing a game, I often just like stop and take a photo. If something happens and I feel like I got a good picture, I take a photograph of the scoreboard as a note. So I use my camera to kind of take notes during the game, right? So I'll just go ahead and take a picture of the scoreboard. Even if I feel like I'm not doing that great, just do that. Because then when you look through Bridge at all of your pictures, you can tell if you were in the first quarter or the second quarter or the third quarter or the fourth quarter. You can tell what the score was at that time, right? If they scored, how did the scoreboard change, right? So a lot of times taking a picture of the scoreboard kind of throughout the process helps me know, it helps me write better captions because then I know what was going on, right? So take pictures of the scoreboard. If you feel like you got a good thing, take a picture of the scoreboard. Take a photo of the roster. So I lose everything, but I will never lose my phone. My phone is like always in my back pocket. I always have it on me. So just take a picture if you got a physical roster of it, or screenshot the roster so that you have it, so that you can know, especially if you don't end up doing a Mercer sport or a sport that's online. If you're doing like a high school sport or something like that, it might be harder to find. So I'll just take a picture of the rosters of both teams so I can know both teams, what's going on. The other thing is sometimes you'll have an amazing moment of a person sliding into home base and their body will be twisted, they'll be on the ground, dust will be everywhere, and you won't know what number their jersey is, right? So what do you do then? In the moment, you took a picture, you look at your picture, you look down, and you can't see what number jersey they are. Have you?
Maybe find out what position they're playing and then look on the roster and it'll tell you that.
Yeah, so you could find out what you could like ask around to find out. I think there's something a little bit better that you could do in the specific moment. Rod? Stats are helpful. In that moment, they're gonna get up, right? They slid into home base. They're gonna get up. They're probably gonna dust themselves off and walk off the field. When they walk off the field, take another picture of them. That's not your picture. That's not the picture. That's the storytelling picture of the moment that you're going to turn into me. But that picture is a clear note of the number of their jersey, right? So sometimes following that action, right, is also just for my own. I'm always taking visual notes with my camera to help inform my captions and my storytelling later, right? So if you got a really good picture, just like wait a minute to figure out what they're going to do next. And the reason I like to take pictures is because I find sports go really fast a lot of times. Sometimes some are slower than others, but it's easier for me to just take a picture and then know that was the person who just did that thing in the previous picture than to write it down on a sheet of paper or like in a notepad. I think it's easier to just take those notes on my camera. All right, so roster and scoreboard. Tennis is tricky because they don't wear jerseys. So that is one where I will, if you end up photographing tennis, it's easier for me to just go to the coach and just say, hey, can you tell me who's playing who on each one of the courts? So you can ask like, who's that? And then write that down, write down the court number, make sure you take a picture maybe of like the court number. And that'll be helpful because I think it's really dangerous to assume that you can find a picture of someone later to find their name. I think it's much easier to kind of ask those questions while you're there than to try to figure it out later. You might have two people, yeah. All right. All right, let me see. So here are some more moments. And I want you to look at these and think like, these are really great sports moments, right? And if you capture the most important moment of the game and it's really storytelling, maybe it's not going to be as clean as this, and maybe it's not going to have follow all of those compositional rules that we've learned, right? But sometimes they do, and it's amazing, right? Sometimes you find these really clean, really just crisp sports photos that also follow a lot of those compositional ideas that we've learned in class. So like how beautiful, how beautiful. He's in light, right, against his dark background, and he pops out. Gail Monfils of France dives for a forehand in the 4th round match against Andrei Kuznetsov of Russia during day 8 of the 2016 Australian Open. The jockey Dusain Andres is falling off his house, Marcus Aurelius, in a hustle called the Irish Bank during the horse race in the Czech Republic in 2016. I know. Do y'all want to go ride horses after this? Does anybody ride horses in here? Or really, Kai? It's awesome. And Katie, did you raise your hand too? Have y'all had bad falls? Really? Oh man, did you get back up and get on, or did you have to like shake it off and take a breather? Oh, do you have a story with either of them that you'd like to share? Oh no. Oh my gosh. Oh, that's terrible. Katie? All right. This is another like tragic but incredible moment. If you don't know this moment, this is why storytelling in your caption really, really matters. So if you know this moment, then you know, but if you don't know this moment, listen to this caption. Michael Jordan has an emotional moment in the locker room after winning the 1996 NBA championship. Michael's father was murdered not long after the Bulls won the 1993 NBA Finals. Michael Jordan took the next 2 years off from basketball and returned for the 1995-1996 season. This photo was taken immediately after the Bulls won the finals. The day was June 16th, 1996, Father's Day.
When he took off basketball, did he go play baseball, or was there like?
Yeah.
So not every photograph is like an amazing image, right? But sometimes it's like the perfect moment. It's that moment, and that moment is storytelling, and that moment really matters. This is from 1998. San Francisco 49ers quarterback Joe Montana leads his team down the field in the closing minutes against the Cincinnati Bengals in the Super Bowl. With only 3 minutes and 10 seconds left in the game, Montana marched the 49ers 92 yards down the field to beat the Bengals 20-16. This is in the Atlanta Olympics in 1996. Carrie Strung holds her pose after sticking the landing on her vault despite a painful ankle injury suffered on her first attempt. The United States gold medal hopes rested on her, and she fought the pain on her second attempt to secure the title for the US. You hear that second line really makes you care, right? I love these old film images. I think they're so. This is Super Bowl 7, January 14th, 1973. The Dolphins defensive lineman Manny Fernandez, 75, hurdles a Redskin offensive lineman in pursuit of quarterback Billy Kilmer, 17. Okay, this is helpful. How do you let me know who's doing what? We've talked when there's multiple people in a picture, you'll put in parentheses left and then in parentheses right at the end of their names, right? Like Evie Wilson, right, speaks to Michael Williams, left, right? To explain that. In sports, after their name, put in the parentheses the number on the jersey so that we can know who they are, right? So instead of, while we might know throws the ball, that might be really clear. Number 75 in the caption says Manny Fernandez, in parentheses, 75, hurdles a Redskin offensive lineman in pursuit of quarterback, right? Okay, Fernandez would finish the game with 17 tackles as the Dolphins defeated the Redskins 14-7 to become the first and last team to finish an NFL season undefeated. It's exciting that we no longer have the Redskins. They're the Washington football team, and they are in search of a new name, which is very exciting. I wonder what that will mean for pictures like this. In the 1984 Olympics, world champion Mary Decker, who became tangled with Britain's Zola Budd about halfway through the 3,000-meter run, looks on from the infield after falling from the track. The collision ended Decker's day and shook up Budd, who fell from the lead to 7th place. It's 1965. Boston Celtics guard John Havlicek stole the ball on the inbound pass from the Philadelphia 76ers to score the Celtics victory. The Celtics would go on to the NBA Finals, where they would defeat the Lakers in 5 games. All right, so those are like moments, right? Those are specific moments that are storytelling. But I want you to also, in this idea of capturing action and then capturing reaction, sometimes there's also something called features this gets at the atmosphere of why people like sports, right? People like going to sports games and seeing them live in person because there's a whole culture around it, and there's all of these ways that you can participate in it, even if you're not an athlete. All right, so a feature is a picture that supplements that really newsy image. So that specific moment of the game scoring touchdown and the reactions from the crowd, right? A feature supplements that. So a feature might be a fan for the other team crying, right? It's not maybe the most storytelling picture, but it's another one. It's another moment, another interesting thing that supplements and builds out the fuller story of that with that news image. I have a quote here that says, Tommy Methusade said that being a sports photographer is the epitome of multitasking. When you constantly watch the game, you're looking for peak action, but you're also keeping your eyes on the sideline for reactions and other things. So look around and look for fans. Are they wearing something quirky? Are they doing something funny? Are they, is there like a cute moment between a parent and a child, right? There might be a lovely story there, right? Like maybe this was the team that they grew up in, that they grew up celebrating. And this is maybe that child's first game, right? There might be something storytelling there. And then also look at the team and the team's reactions as well during those moments. So dugout, bench, moments on the field. Is there anything around the action or happening in the arena of the game that could be storytelling and interesting? In a sports feature photo, photographers ignore the crucial winning moment in favor of capturing the atmosphere of the event. Impressionistic pictures of this kind transcend the actual event and become a universal statement about the sport. Kenneth Cobre. So this is where you get to kind of apply those things that you've learned to try to capture just what it feels like to be there, right? A huge part of visual journalism is placing other people in a space that they don't get to be in, but you are there, right? I don't get to be at the NBA finals. You get to go to the NBA finals. What was it like to be there, right? Doesn't have to be that one moment. Are y'all really hot in this room? Like pretty hot. I'm gonna take a break for a sec. How hot do you think it is? Would you like to announce it? It's pretty hot. I was like, am I just nervous? I was like, it feels really hot up here. Okay, so feature photos are not that storytelling moment. They're not that peak action, right? But this is where you get to play as a photographer and kind of capture these quirky moments. So once I feel like I've gotten some good action photos, then I'll try to just play around with my camera and to see what other kinds of pictures I can get. This is in Melbourne, Australia. Athletes warm up during the Australian Gymnastics Championships. So this is during the warm up. So this is a perfect moment where you're probably not going to get the picture that's like the storytelling moment of the peak action that everyone's been training for. This is a time where you can play with your camera, right? How do you think they got this picture? Huh? Yes, great. So there's a really low shutter speed. One person is standing really still, waiting, practicing, and then this other action is happening within it. And so they slowed their shutter speed very slow. I would say probably maybe 1/10 is what I would assume this would be at. So that this person who's really not moving at all can still be frozen, but you get a lot of blur on the fast jump that's happening in the air. This is a moment that happens after this fight. This fighter goes up to his daughters, and the daughters are like comforting him, making sure that he's okay. These are these like really storytelling moments where you learn more about him, right? This isn't the storytelling moment from the fight itself, but it builds this idea of the fuller story of what's going on. All right. I'm giving you a trigger warning for those of you who don't like injuries. Track and field line judge Leah Mara Laurencio is helped after a javelin hit her foot during the Brazil Trophy, a national track and field competition in São Paulo, Brazil. It's really brutal. Okay. Father's condolences. Mike Manning, an assistant coach for the Naples Rockets 9 and 10-year-old softball team, hugs his daughter, Taylor, who is pitcher for the team. Manning often sounded like a drill sergeant, commanding respect with the tone of his voice and intensity in his eyes. The moment Taylor's team lost, Mike went from being a coach and drill sergeant to a father who was there to love his daughter. No more, no less. She needed her dad, and he was there. So we're looking at a lot of photos of like professional sports teams, right? We're looking at a lot of pictures of pro sports, college sports, all of that. But there are such amazing moments at Little League, right? Like you can take incredible photos at really accessible sporting events. You do not have, it doesn't have to be the game-winning shot that gets a team to the NBA finals, right? It can be a moment like this, right? It can be sports means a lot to a lot of people. And a lot of times that starts really young, right? Michael, how early did you start playing your sport? Yes, exactly, right? Wish I could see a photo of 3-year-old Michael playing football. All right. Through the glass at the Red Pine Lodge, Molly Moore of Fairbanks, Alaska, watches skiers and snowboarders enjoy the fresh powder at the Canyons Resort in Park City, Utah. This is probably photographed through a window. This is from the Las Vegas Review Journal. Francisco Rodriguez runs by the concession stand to the football field for practice at Keystone Academy in Sandy Valley, Nevada. The impoverished rural school has been threatened with closure, which would break up the football team. Gives us just like the sense of place, right? This is an incredible picture. Athlete JP Fayberge runs on a trail under moonlight while training for the Carlsbad Marathon on December 3rd, 2006 in San Marcos, California. 34-year-old Thurberg had his right leg amputated after a motorcycle accident 10 years ago and has been a competitive athlete, triathlete, and marathon runner ever since, placing second in his division in last year's Triathlon World Championships. So this is probably one where it's a little bit predictable where he was running, right? And they probably saw this picture and then set it up and then waited for it, right? This probably wasn't an accident. This was a moment where they knew it was coming, so they wanted to prepare for that. Veteran Porcor surfer Sandra Buguelo takes a nap before confronting the mighty tidal bore wave in the dangerous channel between the Caviana and Mexicana Islands, some 15 miles from the mouth of the Amazon River. The tide of the Amazon had dropped dramatically, which always precedes the arrival of an inland-bound wave. This group uses the muddy banks on the Isle of Pacas as a staging point before setting out to surf the Porocoa wave through the Amazon jungle. This is a like quiet moment waiting beforehand. This is a fan who's out there in a space where all these cyclists are about to go by in a Cape Town cycle tour in South Africa. This is, these two players pull on each other's beards as like a celebratory thing that's like one of the things they do multiple times during the game, right? So the photographer saw this and then thought, okay, I'm gonna take a picture. It's probably gonna happen again. All right. So how are you gonna take these pictures? The most important thing for you to do is to learn how to freeze action, right? So to freeze action, you need action. Yes, okay, I love that, Daniel. Yes, okay. Answer from left field that I didn't expect, but was right. You need a really high shutter speed, okay? So you're gonna need a very high, fast shutter speed. I'll say it'll probably be around 1/500, right? So it'll probably be around 1/500, okay? If you find that it's impossible to get to 1/500, you're gonna need to up your shutter speed, your ISO. So if you find that you can't get there, try raising your ISO to allow you to have a higher shutter speed. So if you're finding that you're not able to get what you want, try raising your ISO to be able to get that picture. It's often better to have a high ISO that's a little grainy than to have a picture that doesn't freeze that motion. All right. The other thing that will impact your shutter speed is how far away you are from the action. To illustrate this, imagine standing really, really far away from a highway and watching cars go by. If you're really far away, those cars are like, you see it over there. It's like slowly going by the highway, right? But if you were to be right next to the highway, that car would like whiz past, right? So how far you are from the action will impact how fast your shutter speed needs to be. If you're really close to those cars, you're gonna need a very fast shutter speed because they're gonna be flying by you. But if you're a little bit further away, it's gonna appear as though the action is slower, so you won't need quite as high of a shutter speed. So think about that. Your distance to the action will impact the shutter speed that you need. And then also think about your angle. So where you stand is gonna impact if it's coming at you, right? Versus if this was taken from the side, he's gonna fly across your camera and you'll have a much shorter period of time to capture that action. Whereas if he's coming at your camera, you can capture him like a little bit before, a little bit after, you'll get pretty much the same picture, right? So depending the direction of the action will also impact your shutter speed. And then a lot of times in peak action, meaning if someone jumps in the air, usually what happens, they jump in the air, they actually hover for like a little brief, tiny millisecond, and then come back down. So if you capture someone in that peak action where they're going up and then getting ready to come back down, what happens is that you can have a little bit of a slower shutter speed in that moment because they're kind of frozen for a very short period of time. Another fun thing to try, depending on your sport, is what's called panning. So this is a photograph that has panned. And this is when you have a slow shutter speed because you want to show movement, but you are moving your camera at the speed of the thing that's moving. This is a good example. So everything else is blurred in this picture, in the background of this picture, right? But this car is flying by. The photographer probably has this, I would guess is like 1/40th of a second is probably like 1/40th, maybe 1/60th, but it's going pretty fast. I might even say lower than that, like 1/20th, around there. And the photographer is moving their camera at the same speed that that car is whizzing past them. So in hopes, it's really hard to do. I wouldn't do this for like the most important moment. This is one of those ones that I would play with, if you could play with it. But it's a kind of an interesting way to capture the feel of being there, right? Yep.
So how was it able to just get the car in the focus?
So his depth of field and will help you. But the most important thing, the reason this is in focus is less depth of field and more. It's the only thing that's moving at the same speed he is. And because of that, everything else is blurred. Everything else is still. And the photographer is moving their camera at the same time this is happening. So it blurs everything, even if it was a normal depth of field, all of the road would probably also be in focus, right? But he's blurring that by moving. So the photographer is moving his body, but it's captured at the same speed. This is really difficult to do. For example, they probably took this picture a whole bunch of times. Maybe they wanted this person to be in focus, but that person ended up being in focus, right? All of these riders and horses are moving at different speeds. That's why they're not all panned perfectly. But this is kind of a fun thing. If you're feeling bored and you want to play, panning would be fun. And then try putting your camera on continuous shutter mode. So instead of just taking one picture, you might want to take multiple pictures in a row to capture that action. So start before you think the action's going to happen and then take pictures through the action, right? That'll help you get that. And then we've kind of talked about the autofocusing, but where your focus is really matters, right? And so sometimes you might want to override autofocus and use manual focus. For example, like baseball, if you want to photograph someone at a base, you could focus on the base, set it to manual focus, and wait for something to happen in that space, right? But you can also, I use autofocus. A lot of people use autofocus. It's just going to take you a bit to like learn your camera because these things are going to be happening really quickly. So just spend some time and you will get better. I, for these pictures, usually have the sensor be in the middle of the camera so that I just am taking pictures of things that are happening right in the middle of the camera. Because like we've had, if, for example, like if the sensor was right here, it would focus behind this person. So I would just aim so that this person was in the center. So my sensor was on them and it would focus the batter. If you do use manual focus, if it is predictable, if there is a way you're like having a ton of hard time, you're having a lot of trouble with autofocus, try using manual focus. And what I do when I shoot sports and I have to kind of override or want to play with manual focus, is that you want your depth of field to not be very shallow. So shallow depth of field is like f5.6. That's like for your cameras, that's kind of as shallow as you get. you might want it for the purposes of having more chance of getting the thing in focus. You might want it to be at f8 or f12. Having a little bit of a higher f-stop number will allow a little bit more of your image to be in focus, which will give you a little bit more kind of room to breathe. And then just anticipate the action. So sports are repetitive. Even if you don't know it, you're gonna watch it for 10 minutes and then you're gonna be able to kind of get the lay of the land, what usually happens, right? There's a lot of really great things that happen. They call timeout in a basketball game and all of the players run to their coach and they have a huddle, right? That huddle is interesting and storytelling. Maybe there's a picture there, right? Or every single time there's something happening on the court, all of the players that are sitting on the bench are watching, right? You can know that if you're kind of bored, maybe watch them and play with that a little bit. But those feature photos are gonna be really helpful. And that's where you can kind of be the most creative. All right, let me pull up the assignment. Do I have the sports? Oh, one sec. I'm gonna pop this out for a second. I don't know if I've pulled this up. Okay, I don't think I've put this on line yet, so let me share the screen one more time. All right. So I need to just put this on a canvas. Okay, but the assignment for this class, and I'll put this online, is to photograph a sporting event. And I do not want it to be a practice or a scrimmage. It's really important to me that this is that they're really playing the game, that this isn't a practice, that you are going to a game that is happening. It's fine with me if that's intramural. That's totally fine with me. I don't want you to be photographing at your intramural team. I would also not like you to be photographing at the team that you are a member of. So I want you to make time to go to a different game. And I want you to take at least 70 pictures. I need to update this from last year. I want you to take at least 70 pictures and then turn in 3 photographs. So I want you to be there. I want you to take a bunch of pictures, but you're going to turn in 3 pictures. And I want those ideally to be something that is an action, something that is reaction, and then something that is a feature. Okay? So an action moment, a reaction moment, and then something that's just for you that gets at the atmosphere of what it's like to be there. Okay? So I'll update Canvas so that this is accurate. And then I don't know how to just gonna screen share my whole. The last thing. Okay. I need to figure out how to do this so that it's not. Okay, so everybody look at these times right now. For the assignment, so, we learn something on a Thursday and then we practice it and turn it in for Tuesday. And for the sports assignment, I want to spend 2 weeks photographing sports because I think it's a really tough thing to learn and you're going to do it and then it's going to be frustrating and it's not going to work out and you're going to be able to go back and do it again. So, and I'll also just take a picture of this. All right. I'm going to give